Here we will see return system date and time function in SQL Server. First is current timestamp. This function returns a date time value containing the date and time of the computer on which the instance of SQL Server runs. It is an ANSI SQL function. The return value doesn't include the time zone offset. General syntax is current timestamp. For example, if we give the query select current timestamp as current time, it will give the output as current date and time. Next is get UTC date. This function returns a datetime value containing the date and time of the computer on which the instance of SQL Server runs. This function returns the date and time values as UTC time, that is coordinated universal time. General syntax is get UTC date. For example, if we give the query select get UTC date as current date and time, it will give the output with current date and time. Next is get date. This function returns a date time value containing the date and time of the computer on which the instance of SQL Server runs. The return value doesn't include the time zone offset. It is the TSQL version of the same function. General syntax is get date. For example, select get date as current time will give the output current date and time. Next is sysDateTime. This function is used to get the system's current date and time with more fractional second precisions. It returns a datetime to value. The return value doesn't include the time zone offset. General syntax is sysDateTime. For example, if we give select sysDateTime as current date, it will give the output with current date and time and fractional second precision. Next is sysUTC datetime. This function returns a datetime to value containing the date and time of a computer on which the instance of SQL Server is running. This function returns the date and time values as UTC time. General syntax is sysUTC datetime. For example, select sysUTC datetime as current date will give the output with current date and time as a UTC time. Next is sysDateTime offset. This function returns a datetime offset value containing the date and time of the computer on which the instance of SQL Server runs. The return value indicates the time zone offset. General syntax is sysDateTime offset. For example, select sysDateTime offset as current date will give the output current date and time with time zone offset. Here we will execute these datetime functions. So first we will execute current timestamp. So select current timestamp as current timestamp. When we execute this, it will display the current date and time. Next we will see get UTC date. So select get UTC date as get UTC date time. Since it is function, we will give bracket here and we will execute this. It will display the current date and time with UTC values. Then we will see get date function. When we execute this, it will display current date and time. The current timestamp and get date function executes the same date and time. The only difference is that current timestamp is an ANSI function and get date function is a TSQL function. Then we will see sysDateTime function. When we execute this, it will display date and time with fractional second precisions. Then we will see sysUTC datetime. When we execute this function returns the system date and time with UTC values. And we will see sysDateTime offset. And when we execute, it will display system date and time with time zone offset.